Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We're hosting webinars daily, and you're watching Cloud 101, where we discuss the fundamental concepts of Google Cloud Platform and learn from best practices in different markets. My name is Stephen Elliott, and with me today is Nick Orlev. And you can ask questions anytime on the live platform. We have someone standing by to answer them. So let's get started. So again, my name's Stephen Elliott. I'm a product manager on Cloud Billing, and I'm really excited today. We have Nick Orlev, a customer engineer we work with a lot, who's given a presentation at Google Next San Francisco, in fact.
Yep.
So he's flown here especially just for us from San Francisco.
Yep, you guys love me that much that I'm willing to fly up here and do some demos for you.
That's how much I love it. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more advanced use cases in dashboarding and using BigQuery export to build custom dashboards for your business metrics and for cloud billing. So to cover that, the agenda today is a brief overview of why you should care about cost management. We've had several talks about this, but this is for new members of the audience, and hopefully you're convinced you should, so this should be a quick section. And then I'll cover what tools we offer at Google Cloud to help you with cost management. And then pretty quickly, I'm going to turn it over to you. And Nick will talk about his demo and his special business. You can maybe tell from his T-shirt what he'll talk about. And then we'll wrap it up with best practices and go to any questions from the audience. So this is kind of a fundamental question. Hopefully, there's no convincing that I need to do here. But why should you analyze your cloud costs? And we have different ways of presenting this. But today, just give a slightly different spin on it. Obviously, costs translate to profit. And as a cloud provider, our main goal is to make sure that our customers, that would be you, are successful building your businesses. And cost management is the very important denominator in your profit equation. So all of your usage obviously translates to cost. We put it through the pricing engine, which is not a real component, but it's also much more complicated than multiplication, but I'll call it the pricing engine. And when the usage gets translated into cost, very important question is, how do you backtrace from the cost back into what caused it? What were the cost drivers? What were the things that are good sources of cost? What are the things that could be optimized? And so and a really important feature that we'd like to provide is the sense of control. And so there's being in control of your costs and also just being confident that whatever happens to your business or your operations, you'll be able to respond to it intelligently. You'll be able to have actionable data and be able to optimize your cloud investments so you get the right ROI that you want for your business. And there we go. So be intelligent about it. And actually, the reason I like today's talk in particular is because we're finally going to get to a point in the webinar series where we talk about merging your key performance indicators of your business, any custom metrics, any logs with cost data, because that's really where we get to translate cost management into business performance and profit metrics.
Yeah, I really see that data is the new form of currency, and so the more data that you can collect, the more that you can analyze and make actual business decisions based off of real data, not kind of assumptions, and so it just empowers everyone. So the more data you can capture, the more and better decisions you can make.
Yep. So there you go. You'll save money. That's why you should analyze cloud costs. But you'll see from the demo and from the conversation we'll have around it that it's a lot more than just saving money, and you've probably heard this in previous webinars, but there's a lot of virtuous things that happen when you have very good cost management and customized dashboards that merge cost management with your business metrics. All right, so just as a brief overview, and I won't spend too much time on this, these are the types of features we offer for cost management on Google Cloud. Previous webinars, next talks that we've given have covered this in more depth, so please, on the Cloud on Air platform, you can view previous webinars. You can go to cloud.google.com/cost-management to see more resources. But just to level set, we offer billing reports that are out-of-the-box charts, let you configure and slice and dice your costs and see trends at a glance. We offer different types of reports as well. We have a cost breakdown chart that helps you see savings at a glance. We just launched a cost table chart to give you a tabular view that looks like your invoice. I think that went GA yesterday. And then we have a cut analysis report that shows you committed use discounts. So we're building a bunch of reports that should work straight out of the box in the billing console. And then we have billing export. We're going to spend a lot of time today talking about billing export because out-of-the-box reports are great for at-a-glance things that work that you don't have to invest in building. But a lot of the rubber really hits the road when you can use detailed billing export and merge it with your custom data.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's one of the reasons we initially reached out to Nick, because he had so much experience helping customers build that, and that's what we wanted to get in front of the next audience and in front of the webinar audience.
Yep, excited to share it. So
yeah. And then on the third item, budgets, alerts, and quota, here we're starting to get to a sense of control. So you need to see what your costs are doing, have visibility, but then act on it and make sure you're setting up the right safeguards for your environment. And the way I think about budgets and alerts versus quota is lagging versus leading control. So if you've set up an alert, that's usually a lagging indicator because the metric has to pass the threshold before you get alerted. You can obviously set the threshold early so it starts to feel like a leading indicator, but it doesn't prevent the threshold from being crossed. And then quota, usage quota in particular, is a more proactive way of controlling and throttling costs, where you can decide which environments should have high quotas, which should have low quotas, and so on. And then finally, recommendations. Recommendations are features like VM right sizing, or in the an analysis of your committed use discounts, so you can see what your utilization is and make intelligent decisions about it. And that's another set of features that we offer on Google Cloud.
Yeah. You know, Stephen, I have one question. I actually got this from a customer last week. So they're using budgets and alerts, and essentially they're sending an alert once spend hits 50% or what have you. But what if they're very concerned about going over budget? Maybe they have a certain amount of budget that they can spend. Are there any programmatic ways of actually like stopping billing or shutting down resources once you hit a certain kind of threshold?
Yeah, actually, so there are a couple different ways to do this. One of the most effective but also indiscriminate ways of doing this is to set up a programmatic budget alert. You can set that up through PubSub. So have a PubSub alert that gets sent out, and then script a very simple cloud function that disables your billing account.
Oh, okay.
So that's I call that the big red button. And this is actually can be a scary way to do things. You probably don't want to do it for production environments.
Yeah.
But it can be surprisingly effective for example, sandbox environments where you want your developers to innovate. And you say, hey, feel free to use a sandbox project up to $500 per developer in your org, and you could have that environment set up to just self-destruct if the developer starts spending too much money. And we have customers that do that because that's exactly what they want. They want to have free reign to a degree, and then they're okay tearing it down. But because it's programmatic, you could have Cloud Functions do other things. You could start to have Cloud Functions change the behavior of the environment, and you just need to think a lot. It's always more complicated than it feels at first glance, because gracefully throttling an environment is a very technical conversation, and so the person who usually wants to control costs needs to have a very deep conversation with the environment manager.
Yeah. If you're shutting down resources, you need to be very careful about what you're shutting down. Makes sense.
So these are just screenshots of what some of the other tools look like, but we're going to spend a lot of time in a live demo today. So billing reports, again, out-of-the-box charts where you can slice and dice the costs and see trends at a glance very quickly. And then billing export. Here, we're going to see a very live demo of this, but this is the detailed version of the data that goes into billing reports with some extra detail that's not available in the console. So for example, user labels, which aren't available in the console yet, are readily available in billing reports. System labels that come from certain services that attach labels like GCE to your usage, and project labels, for example. So there's definitely metadata in billing export that's not available in regular reports.
Makes sense.
So I guess this is where we start to get into what Nick's going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stephen, like you said, I work with a lot of customers, and those customers typically want to derive more insights from the data that they're capturing. And so what we'll be walking today are a couple examples that you see on the screen. One is actually mapping your spend to your key performance indicators. So for instance, I'm saying that my company is G-Bike & Co. We're a company that rents out G-Bikes, those awesome multicolored bikes that are around Google campuses. Not really, but a fun theory experiment. And so we're going to be translating how much it costs to run my infrastructure on Google Cloud and compare that to the number of bike trips I'm taking, the cost per bike trip, cost per mile, all that kind of thing. Next thing we'll be going through is how to attribute your spend per GCP folder. Like you said, the billing export has labels and a lot of very granular data points that you can drill into. But one thing that we'll show you how to simplify is how to break that down based off of your folder hierarchy. What I generally advise customers is that your folder hierarchy should kind of resemble what your internal corporate hierarchy looks like. So maybe you have an engineering team and an IT team, production team, staging team, all that kind of stuff. We'll go into just a quick recap of how you might be able to break down something as complex as GKE into individual spend per resource and per tenant and all that, especially for shared resources. That can become a bit of a challenge. And then we'll finish out with how to essentially report some of this stuff through Data Studio, which we'll be showing throughout the demos, and then Google Sheets for maybe some other users who want something a little bit more traditional to like a finance team or something like that.
And as we're going through this, definitely think about what the key performance indicators are for your business. So what I really like about this particular demo is miles traveled, or like performance indicators where your business probably cares about it for the life of the business, unless you start selling squirrels or something. I don't know what you would, if you stay in the G-Bike business, some of these metrics are evergreen metrics, and regardless of how you implement it, what feature you use on GCP to support it, the cost per bike mile traveled or the cost per bike day rented, that's an evergreen metric, and it's very useful for managerial decisions and for tech decisions. So think about what you would do for your business as kind of Nick's going through his example.
Yeah, absolutely. Every business thinks of things their own way, and every business kind of captures different metrics, and various metrics are the most important to them. So yeah, it's keeping your costs very relative and in the terms that maybe your executive team or your management team or something is very familiar with. So. And it also makes keeping track of things and trends very simplified.
Right.
Cool. So specifically for this demo, I have the billing export that's being exported directly into BigQuery. We've covered this on several other webinars in the past, so we won't walk through this piece. But I think what's going to be very valuable is the second piece, which is actually taking some of your business data that might be in BigQuery today, maybe it's not, but my example, I have essentially capturing all of the bike trips that are historically being made from our customers, joining those in BigQuery. As you may or may not know, BigQuery is Google's fully managed data warehouse. We try to make things as simple as possible for our data scientists and analytics teams. And we try to break down the need for different data silos so that you can have everything in BigQuery and be able to derive real insights from that data. And then finally, we'll show this in a user-friendly dashboard so that you can maybe send this to your management team or what have you, and just get something that's a little bit nicer to the eyes. So we'll switch over to a demo real quick in my demo environment. Okay. So as you can see on my screen, this is BigQuery. If you're not very familiar with BigQuery, I would definitely recommend maybe checking out some of the other Cloud on Air webinars. I know that BigQuery is a very popular topic. There's a lot of great content out there. I have so this is my production project. I have a couple different data sets within this project. And this one right here is my billing export. And so you can see I'm capturing all sorts of information on this table, project information, cost information, labels, and all that. If I click on the preview, you can see that it captures quite a bit of data. And this is what we'll be essentially using as the source of truth for how much it costs to capture and run all of my business.
Do you, on data sets and tables, for people who aren't familiar, do you have any best practices of where the data goes? So export as a primer, billing export gets sent to a data set of your choice that you create.
My general best practice is that you should have a data set that's more specific to billing information, just to keep it in one place. And then I have a separate data set that's capturing all my bike information, the number of trips and all that. I generally keep this in different locations because BigQuery allows you to share these resources out, and so some audiences might be very interested in the billing data, and some audiences might be interested in a different data set. So I think that it generally works the best that way. The other advantage is when you're doing a join across tables or even across projects, as long as you set the correct IAM permission sets, it doesn't really matter. You can join across anything. So we keep it very simple that way. And like I said, we're trying to remove the need to have a whole bunch of different data silos.
Yeah, actually the permissions, I didn't even think about that. Permissions is a great example where you might put revenue metrics in one data set and cost metrics in another.
Yeah.
Because sometimes profitability is a sensitive thing and you want to have limited access
Yep.
to that. But
Very
you
true.
don't. You can control it as a group instead of every single table.
Yep, very true, very true. So like I was showing, this is the billing export. And the other piece of information that's going to be useful for me is my bike trips data. So this is my production table. From this table, I'm capturing useful information around the trip ID of the customer, when they start the bike ride, when they stop, whether they're a subscriber or just a customer who walked off the street and paid with a credit card, some information about like their background and stuff. And so if I click on the preview of this table, you can see that there's a bunch of useful information, but the challenge is that this doesn't show me how much it actually costs to run my environment. And so what I'm going to be doing is running a simple join. So I'll just click the Show Editor button up here. I'll just expand this. So if anyone is familiar with SQL, you'll see that this is a pretty simple SQL statement. There's plenty of resources out there if you're not as familiar with SQL. But essentially what I'm going to be doing is running one part of the join, which is simply going to pull from my production bike share trips table. I'm counting the number of trips that are taken per day. I'm summing the duration so I can get the total number of minutes, the date, and whether a customer is a subscriber or just someone who's off the street. And then I'm simply going to be joining that to my billing export table and capture the dates and then total the costs. And so here you can do all sorts of different things. I can capture the different product that was used or the region or what have you, but I'm keeping things pretty simple. And I'm just going to join on the date so that I can match the date of the billing export and the date of how many trips happened in that day. And so I ran the query, and you can see that I'm now capturing some useful information on the number of subscribers, the duration, and the number of trips, and then actually comparing that to the total cost per the day for running my infrastructure. So this is very useful information, but I want to make this a little bit more presentable to my executive team, et cetera. And so what I'll do is essentially just hit the Explore with Data Studio button. I've already built out this dashboard here. And this dashboard essentially shows a little bit more of a visually friendly way of displaying that data. And so you can see on the top side of this dashboard that the blue line is the total number of bike trips that happened throughout the course of the day and the period of a month. And then the red is showing me the total cost of running my infrastructure. So you can see that it's pretty stable trend up until about August 12th. And then my cost starts to skyrocket. And so being an executive, I might start to think, okay, what's going on here? My total cost of running my environment is significantly increasing, but my number of bike trips isn't. So something like this would be potentially a red flag to do a little bit of investigation. And it's these kinds of insights that really empower you to make better business decisions.
Right.
And in case anyone's unfamiliar with Data Studio, it's incredibly easy to use and build these really nice dashboards. And so I could take this and run with it, but I really want to start enriching the data a little bit more. And so what I'll start to do next is actually build in my folder structure of my projects. And so here on the screen, you can see that I have a bunch of different projects that are running in my environments, projects that are under my development folder, production folder. I've been using a bunch of labels and stuff, but if I want to start comparing costs with my folder hierarchy, what I would do is essentially run something that's a bit more programmatic and start pulling this in. The reason why is in the billing export. Let me just go into preview. In the billing export, the way that we capture the folder information is actually this field here called project ancestry numbers. And these numbers are the numerical representation of that folder name. The primary reason why we do this rather than using the folder names is that they're immutable numbers. And so as things change, you don't have to worry about changing the numbers. Or changing your queries and stuff like that that are running in the background.
Yeah, and this is something we are planning on making improvements to export, just as we go. So we started with folder organization IDs / folder IDs. I think there's up to 4 folders before a project. So that's the immutable number that's never going to change as long as you keep on using that folder. And it's similar to the project ID there is actually a project number. Project ID is an extra thing projects have that's human readable and unique and immutable. And folders don't have that, so we use the IDs here. But hopefully in the future, sometime soon, we'll have the folder human readable names for display, but you'll still want to use the numbers for the queries and the keying.
Yep. I'm excited about that day.
Yeah.
Yep. So until then, what we have here is a way to essentially translate that number into a name. And so I've been working with actually one of my customers who built this GitHub repo. And by the way, we have all of this in a blog that we'll be showing the link to at the end of this webinar so that you can do this yourself. But essentially, it's just a simple GitHub repo that's using Cloud Functions and PubSub to essentially pull the data of your folder structure through a simple API call so that you can populate the data in BigQuery. So this is the GitHub project. And then in BigQuery itself, what that looks like, so after running the Cloud Function, so this is actually my Cloud Function that's running every single day to pull this folder structure just because there might be some changes or something that happen throughout the day. I use that Cloud Function, and then that builds this folder export or this folder structure table. And so in this table, it's essentially saying, here's the ID, which translates to this name, and here are the different parent levels. And so now that I have this information, I can actually do something a little bit more insightful with the data and run a simple query that's going to do another join between the billing export table and this new folder structure table. So once again, this is going to be in the blog, so I won't have to spend too much time on the query, but essentially it's running a function within BigQuery to parse out these folder structures and their names, and then compare them to the billing export. So when I just hit run, all of a sudden, when the query finishes, I'll be able to get a little bit more insightful information showing that on this date, here's my project, my bike rentals production project. In the billing export, this is the ancestry name, and here's what it actually translates to in my human readable format. And so I can tell that this is under folder root, production, bike rentals, United States, and here are the different services and the total spend that I have on this information. And so using this, I can build exactly similar Data Studio dashboard to kind of compare the folder structure to. So I can just go into this. And if you recall, on the right-hand side of the dashboard, it was really showing something a little bit alarming, that my costs are starting to rise. But now that I've actually broken this out into the different departments of my business, I can see that the red line is the production environment that's running my bike environment. And yes, there was a spike. Maybe we switched over to something a little bit more scalable, like App Engine, to run my service instead of like a compute engine. And so there might have been an initial cost to start moving those projects over. But then the costs actually significantly declined for running my bike environment, while at the same time I started doing some dev test work. I'm actually spinning up a new side venture around scooters so I can rent out scooters. And so you can see that I'm starting to increase spend on that. And overall, I can show my executive team that yes, costs are rising. However, the cost per bike is actually declining, and we're working on some really cool projects that are going to be unveiled in the future.
Yeah, my favorite metric here is, like we mentioned earlier, like the cost per bike trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a great, I mean, these are the types of things you can imagine just a single slide saying, how are things going?
Yep.
Cost per bike trip is going down, but we're doing some research and development, and that's going well too. Who knows?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, costs are all relative. As long as you can compare it to something that's specific to your business, then you can start to tease out some of the specifics in it.
Right.
So, cool. And let's just jump back into the slides.
Yeah, so you've talked about some data sources that we can merge in here. Some things, these are just kind of thought provokers, things to think about. If you use App Engine, there's request logs. Actually, there's a customer, Bluecore, Evan Jones from Bluecore gave a great talk at Next San Francisco on a really kind of deep dive into how to merge cost with App Engine metrics to get like session and customer data. BigQuery has query logs, so you could do further analysis on cost with those logs. Cloud PubSub and stack driver metrics are worth considering. And then Kubernetes, we have a slide on this, but Kubernetes storage and compute all have their own usage export. Kubernetes is an exciting one and an important one because a lot of cloud and cloud native is moving toward multi-tenant architectures. So within a project, within a cluster, you have different workloads and teams working on actually parts of the same resource. And so you need a way to divide resource usage down into the fractions, not just group it and put it into folders, but subdivide it. So we have Kubernetes usage metering. And here's a screenshot from the blog post. It's actually a great blog post title. So if you just do a Google search and say GKE for Google Kubernetes Engine, and then the sentence, whose line item is it anyway?
I love that.
You'll find this blog post. And the blog post title is great because that's exactly the purpose of the feature. We have all these cost line items, and you want to figure out which Kubernetes namespace or Kubernetes label owns the cost line item. So the first step that the GKE team did is getting a usage metering table in BigQuery, so it can be joined, which this screenshot's showing the result of a join against billing data, and just divides all your VM costs and other cluster costs by Kubernetes namespace and Kubernetes label. The next step, which we're actively working on, is just getting that to be piped natively into billing export, so you don't even need to do that join. But again, we're working on this iteratively, but even today you can get a breakdown of your GK cost usage metering.
Yeah, that's really awesome. The next thing I wanted to show is essentially capturing the raw data is obviously valuable, but it's the next step of visualizing that data, making it sure that it's presentable to various teams. And I think I demonstrated how easy it was through Data Studio, but there are still a bunch of users that enjoy something that's a little bit more like a tabletized Google Sheets sort of format. And so what we've done with BigQuery specifically is created a feature that's called Connected Sheets. Today it's an alpha, but if you're on various G Suite business and education licenses and stuff, you can sign up and join the alpha. What this essentially does is using BigQuery as the back-end query engine, you can use Google Sheets to create nice pivot tables, graphs, etc., so that you can send these Google Sheets to various teams who might not be as familiar with SQL, but are familiar with creating formulas and charts and all that, and let them leverage the incredible processing power of BigQuery in the back end. For instance, with Google Sheets, there's a limit on how many rows that you can have, just like all the other kind of tabletized providers out there. But because you're using BigQuery as the backend, you can actually have a Google Sheet that has 10 billion rows. Now, imagine trying to load 10 billion rows on your laptop. Your laptop is not going to have a happy day. But because you're using BigQuery in the back end, you get all that extra processing power. It's a familiar interface for those kinds of financial users and stuff. And the best thing is that because it's on G Suite, everything gets shared securely through the standard G Suite permissions. And there's no need to like export data and have multiple copies and all that stuff. Everything gets to be in one single source. So let me just show you real quick what that looks like with another demo. So you can see here that I have this Google Sheet that's up on my screen. I'll just go into Data, Data Connectors, and I'll connect this sheet into BigQuery. I'll pick the project I'm specifically interested in, which is my bike share project, and I'll go into Billing Data. And this is the table that I created earlier showing the billing export with the folders. I'll just go ahead and click Connect. And this is actually going to connect my Google Sheet into the backend BigQuery, and I can start analyzing it. So I have all the data that was populated in BigQuery, and I can do something as easy as create a pivot table, just go open that in a new sheet. For my rows, maybe I'll want to collect the date, and I'll just put it in descending order. For my columns on the top, let's do my folder name hierarchy, because this is what I'm using for all of the different folders and the lines of business within my company. And then for the values, let's do the total cost. And so I just populated that. I hit apply changes. This query runs in the background within BigQuery. And just like that, I have a pretty powerful pivot table that's using BigQuery, using all my data in the back end. Didn't have to migrate anything, didn't have to export anything. And from here, it's just as simple as creating a chart or anything that you're very familiar with within Google Sheets. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, even that change I noticed, because if you don't have a connected sheet, usually the pivot table will just update live because it's processing the data on your laptop. I also run into people who are very good with SQL. I think I count myself in this. I'm comfortable with SQL and I can write great queries, but I'll still use Sheets because you can often just get faster results because you can. Once you learn how to use pivot tables, for better or for worse, they kind of stick.
Yeah.
And this particular, I'm actually excited about the integration between Sheets and BigQuery because there's definitely people who need to do both. There's another really cool feature. You had this table that you talked about scripting where you add the folder names to the folder IDs and also give the parent so that we can do this mapping of what the actual human readable name is. In Data Studio, you can actually do blended data too. So you could have a Google Sheet that just has manually entered data. Like if you know that you need to correct something manually or you want to rename something, you could have a lookup table that's actually a Google Sheet, and then Data Studio can automatically do a join as it's presenting data between the sheet and BigQuery. So there's some really cool features in here for BI and these types of use cases.
Yeah. I really feel like one of the most powerful things about Google Cloud is that we have such a huge ecosystem that allows you to bolt on all these new and exciting features to explore more with your data, to run machine learning models, just to do more and do it better. So I think it's pretty powerful having an ecosystem like that.
Yeah.
Cool. So let me jump back to our slides. And maybe we'll round it off with some best practices.
Yeah. So best practice number one. This one, I think we've repeated this in every single talk that we give. Enable BigQuery billing export on day one. In the future, we'd like to get to a world where it's always available and you can backfill it. Part of the power is that you own the data, so we export it to your data set. Right now, that comes with the downside of that means that you need to enable it to have the data, and we've never met people who have been disappointed that they had too much historical data. So just you could do that right now. You could enable billing export while we're talking.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Awesome. Number two is make sure that you structure your GCP resources with folder structures, with various labels. Essentially, try to avoid having one project with all of your different resources so that when you get to the point of trying to tease out how all the data looks and trends, this makes it much easier, much simpler going forward. So please do this. Make sure you do it early as well, just like Stephen said about the billing export.
Yeah, and there was, just your example is a nice, elegant example of if you do this in advance and thoughtfully, you can answer questions like, well, the cost per bike trip did go up, but we can slice it by what is dev test and what's production, or what's one version of the application, what's another version, and start to get more intelligent answers to cost questions other than costs are rising.
Yeah.
I don't understand why.
Exactly. Yeah.
So another best practice is to make sure you configure your policies and permissions to make sure you have the right people spending Google Cloud money and viewing that spend. We talked a little bit about this in the BigQuery export and dataset permissions example, where you just do a little thinking about what is the right type of data that a certain group of people should have access to, and then put that in a data set, for example, a bunch of tables that might have cost data, and then manage it via Google group that, or a role that has the permission to see everything. And then you don't need to do one-off permissions on every single table and every single user.
Yep.
And then put another set like revenue data or operational log data in other data sets that can easily be joined. And all you ever need to do is make a decision about the sensitive aspect of the data. And if the user has the right permissions, the query works. And if they don't, then the query won't work and you don't get leakage of sensitive information.
Awesome. And last but not least, I would say build a culture of showback. I've also heard it called shameback. Depends on your company. But build a culture of showback within your organization. So since you're capturing this data, rather than just sending it to your executive teams, also send it to your engineering management team so that they can have an idea of what costs are looking like. I would say that the average developer probably doesn't know how much they're costing the business. why not empower them with that information? Last week you spent $50 on Google Cloud. This week it's 75. What's the reason for that? And I would imagine that most developers will start thinking about costs when they start developing applications, which will help you save money in the end.
Yeah, in Google we have things like fix-its and hackathons where people try to improve the operational metrics or things that usually don't get captured on a regular roadmap. And cost is often something that we don't think about on the product development team on a day-to-day basis, but on the companies or teams where they have good shameback, whatever, whatever they want to call it, that's actually something you can start putting in the hands of people closest to the application development and say, well, here's an area for improvement. Various teams could even compete. You know, various companies have multiple messaging teams or multiple teams that do somewhat similar things, and you can start to have a baseline for what feels like a reasonable cost of product delivery and what might have room for improvement. So finally, before we go to questions, here's some next steps and resources. You can find all of the videos we've done, webinars, demos, next sessions, at this bit.ly link, bit.ly/cost-management-videos. There are a couple of hands-on labs now. This is brand new within the last month. We have a hands-on lab for understanding and analyzing costs using billing reports. That's the basic feature. This just gets you started if you don't already have a billing account or spending to analyze. And there's also a hands-on lab for visualizing billing data in Data Studio. And Nick showed you how to do that. There's a couple different ways to do this. Hands-on lab, you can go to our docs and look at how to use the billing reports demo template. There's also a cool button, again, in the theme of kind of seamless integration between Google products, where Nick did a query, it showed results, and then you pressed Explore in Data Studio, which is actually maybe one of the best places just to get started if you already have a data set, because it'll pop it right up and you can start creating new charts on the fly. Our documentation has a lot of these resources, including an onboarding guide if you want to learn more about resource organization and access management. And then finally, we have a couple of blog posts. One I mentioned at the bottom on GK usage metering, and one that went live this week.
Yep, I'm excited about that one.
So this is Nick's blog. I think it went live yesterday.
Yep, went live yesterday. So, yeah, just essentially walking through the whole process that I showed with the queries, the link to the GitHub repo, etc. So everything that you need to start diving a little bit more into your folder structure specifically, and get more insight into your data.
Yeah, and there's some cool tips in there, like how to use scheduled queries to have more efficient data transformation with BigQuery. So it's a cool blog post.
Yep, awesome.
All right. So that's it for the presentation portion of the talk. Please stay tuned for frequently asked questions. We'll be back in less than a minute. All right, thanks for waiting. So we got some frequently asked questions, and we consolidated them here. The first thing, does it cost money to analyze my data once it's in BigQuery?
Yeah, good question. So BigQuery is our fully managed data warehouse. BigQuery does charge per query. It's typically $5 per query. However, or $5, excuse me, per terabyte analyzed in that query. And so what I typically like to tell customers is that, yes, there is a charge for BigQuery. However, actually, when you run the first 5 terabytes of queries that are analyzed are free per month. Actually, sorry, it's first 1 terabyte analyzed per month is free. So what that means is essentially you're getting a terabyte to analyze for free per month with BigQuery. So I would imagine that all of your billing queries that are going to be running, et cetera, won't actually charge you anything per month. Anything on top of that, when you're doing analytics across other things, then yes, you default to the $5 per terabyte. So one thing to keep in mind. I also saw that there was a question on the price of Data Studio. So because Data Studio is within our G Suite offering, as long as you have G Suite and as long as you get Data Studio as part of your G Suite offering, using Data Studio is free. Essentially, we're trying to make this as simple and cost-effective for customers. Mm-hmm. So.
And we haven't, this might be a topic for future webinars, but we also know of customers who use Looker, customers who use Tableau, and other Viz tools. So Data Studio is the one that is the easiest for us to demo also because we just have access to it. But we're not too opinionated about that a lot of the tools have similar principles, but Data Studio has some great features.
Yep. Cool. So I'll jump into the second question
Yeah.
as well. Can I incorporate the spend from other cloud providers? That is a great question. So other cloud providers capture things similar to a billing export. Just using AWS as an example, AWS has a reporting feature where all of your bills and the reports that look exactly like the billing export get sent into your S3 bucket. And within BigQuery, we have something called the data transfer service, which will automatically be able to sync the data from a specific S3 bucket into BigQuery, capturing the schema, capturing the data, et cetera. And so once that data is in BigQuery, you can do anything with it and create those simple joins or those simple reports through Data Studio, and it keeps things pretty automated and simple to use.
Yeah, some of our largest customers are multi-cloud customers, and they do this. They pull in the Amazon billing data into BigQuery just because it's a really great place to do the analysis. And they have it in their private data sets. They're joining it against our billing export data. Again, this is another value of having everything in your own project. You can do whatever you want with it.
Yep.
And then some data they put back in Amazon environments, some they keep in Google, but you just create a new data set and do the join.
Yep.
So can I use Data Studio to send a daily spend report to my leadership team? We do have customers who basically do everything through Data Studio. The daily spend report, I think if the question is specifically, can you schedule an email to be sent, that's something that Data Studio supports.
Yeah, it is.
And so that's another reason we liked Data Studio. It has a lot of cool reports. If I remember correctly, I think Data Studio was originally designed as a way to easily analyze your online business and metrics around your online business. And so you may want reports that come straight from Google Analytics as well, or not just billing export. And so it supports a lot of these use cases where you're managing an online business. Here we're talking about like web services, and you need to translate it into charts. So yeah, Data Studio is a great way to do that. This is also an investment area for us in billing as well. So in the billing console over time, you'll see more configurable reports. You'll start to see savable and shareable reports within the billing console if you don't need to customize it too far. And hopefully that's something we are able to do within the next few quarters. Yeah.
Yep. And I know that we're very short on time, so I'll just say for the last question about incorporating other data sets into BigQuery, similar to the question about the incorporating costs from other cloud providers, we have a bunch of data transfer service connectors into BigQuery, things around Teradata. We have a bunch of connectors through our partners, things like a MySQL database or an Oracle database or Postgres, a bunch of different ways to basically pull that data into BigQuery and use it as your end-to-end data warehouse.
Great. Well, thank you for tuning in, and thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Of course.
Please visit Google Cloud OnAir for more content from Google Cloud experts, and we'll see you around.
Thanks.